Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, Rockstars, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough, and I'm thrilled to have you here. You can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. A big shout out to our sponsors, Plantful and the CFO Leadership Council, for making this podcast possible. Let's dive into a great episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. My name's Jack McCullough, and you can follow us online at rockstarcfos.com. I have a phenomenal guest today, really excited. Shelagh Glaser is the CFO of Synopsys. Synopsys delivers trusted and comprehensive silicon system design solutions from electronic design automation to silicon IP and system verification and validation. Shelagh, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Jack, it's great to be here with you.
And I wrote that down probably from your website, the description. And it's probably pretty good. But before we begin, I think your company's pretty well known, but maybe the mission isn't all that well known with my listeners. So maybe you could fill in the blanks a little bit about Synopsys' mission.
Sure, absolutely. So we build software and solutions for customers to make advanced computing chips. So if you think about companies like NVIDIA, or you think about companies like any of the hyperscalers, they're all building advanced compute chips, and we build the software that allows them to build that advanced compute chip. So we're absolutely mission critical for our customers. Our top customer is the person who runs R&D inside your company. And so we're trying to make that person's super complicated job much easier so they can build great solutions for their customers.
No, that's fantastic. And we're definitely going to get into that, some of the challenges and your philosophy on leading the team. But before that, I want to get a little about your own background. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I am originally from the Midwest.
Yes, I detected. I've learned the absence of an accent usually means that you're from the Midwest. So yeah, you don't have any particular accent. So Ohio or maybe Chicago is a pretty good guess. And you studied economics out of the gate. And I'm curious, other than it being a really difficult major, what was attractive to the young Shelagh about economics, and why did you study that, and how does it support you in your current role?
Well, it's kind of funny. I went to University of Michigan, so another staying in the Midwest, not appreciating that it was warmer other places besides Ohio and Michigan. I didn't get that memo. But I went to school and I started off as a chemistry major, and I was going to be a doctor because my dad's a doctor, both my brothers are doctors. I just assumed that's what people went to school to become doctors. And I realized at some point in my sophomore year that I didn't want to be a doctor, but I wasn't sure what people do if what do people do if they're not doctors? And so I just sort of started a survey of classes, and I took an economics class, and I was just kind of hooked on it because it's so interesting perspective in terms of what motivates things to happen or keeps things to happen, and how is, the view of what is going to happen economically shaping sort of decisions and processes and policies. So I just kind of got hooked on it. And that's how I ended up in economics, really because I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. So the next obvious choice was to look around. And the way I use economics even today is, right now, certainly as we're working through the company, how do we think about what's going to happen with interest rates? How do we think about what's going to happen with demand and supply across the globe? So to me, it's an underpinning of really everything in business.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And, it's certainly, since you apparently have like a scientific mind, economics is probably the closest business discipline to science, I would think, right? I mean, just the mathematical models that are involved and some other things. But, right now, and most of the CFOs I work in my day job for the CFO Leadership Council, And, most of our members are from accounting and finance educationally. And economics is the one area that, perhaps they don't know as well as some others, but whenever we do an economics program, it's always a sellout. Just understanding economics is so crucial to the modern CFO. So
It is. And it's such an interconnected world. I mean, when I went to college, it was much less global than it is now, but you just think about things happening in one part of the world really quickly infiltrating the other part of the world. So I think it's a good underpinning.
And you mentioned everyone in your family is a doctor. Do you have brothers and sisters, and did they indeed go on to become doctors? Or
Yes. So I was one of the people that went into business. My dad used to say, my dad's passed away now, but he used to say business, and it had little quotes. And so I think they were never too sure what I was doing or what that meant. And I think the first time I remember, I was at Intel and I ran corporate planning, and one of our responsibilities was to do the annual report. And I was so excited to bring, this is in the old days when you actually had a physical annual report, to show it. Show it to everybody, because look what I did, versus, obviously you have a lot to show for yourself if you're a doctor with, well care of patients, but it's hard as a finance professional. What's the physical manifestation of what we do? So anyway, that was exciting when I had my annual report to show everybody.
Yeah, no, I never worked for a public company like you, but yeah, I was always excited when there was something I could share. And for those,
Exactly.
since most of you will be listening, not watching on YouTube, when Sheila was quoting her dad with saying business, she was using the finger quotes to make the point. So,
Exactly.
so you were the black sheep in a family of doctors.
Exactly.
How about that? So anyway, so you continued on. You got an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University. And I think that's just another tool that must serve you extraordinarily well as a chief financial officer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was extremely interested in Carnegie Mellon because it had a lot of quantitative. That's one of the areas that they really excelled in. And then the other reason I was interested is I was living in California at the time, and the location back in Pittsburgh was really interesting to me because there's so much going on in that area of the country. So went back to Carnegie Mellon, got an MBA. Lots of good experience because the way Carnegie Mellon's program is, it's mini semesters. So you have really, really rapid semesters, and you can go through a lot of coursework, which I think is really exciting if you think about it, because that's sort of one of the things that's always really interested me. The more you can learn, the more you can expose yourself to, the more you open your aperture about how you approach problems. And most complex problems really require you to think very broadly about what the solutions might be. And so that's what I loved about Carnegie Mellon. It's, enormous amounts of coursework that you could avail yourself to just because they had those mini semesters.
It's interesting because, I would think an MBA is such a critical credential. In fact, I don't want to over dramatize it, but I almost said watershed moment. That's probably a good definition of overly dramatic. But a few years ago, for the first time, there were more CFOs in the Fortune 5,000 who hold MBAs than who hold CPAs. And, I think both are valid, but it just shows how the role of the CFO is evolving, that, it's no longer sort of the corporate historian with a little bit of financial bend. It's kind of the other way around. It's the corporate strategist who understands finance and accounting.
Yeah, I absolutely think what I learned, and actually was a very interesting kind of survey course when I was in school. It was called GAME, where you ran a company. Everybody ran a company. And so I was one of the CEOs of that, kind of basically computer simulation. And, everything that you can imagine goes wrong, which is great because there's so much to be learned when things go wrong. And, how do you bring your team back together? And I very much think of the CFO as, how do you integrate all those different functions? How do you integrate all those different points of view into a combined, financial strategy to go forward? So I think that holistic education is so important because, you don't actually know where is the most critical thing in your company. People will tell you, well, this is the most critical thing, but you may find out at some other different place where there's some critical shortage or some critical issue, and you have to be able to do that full survey. And you have to be able to bring that broader group of executives together.
So I want to explore your career a little bit. And you work for this little company called Intel. It doesn't look like you were there very long. You couldn't even make it 3 full decades. Were you there 29 years?
Short timer. I was an intern, short timer. Yeah, I was there 29 years. And it's funny, when I came out of grad school, and I had, gone to grad school at Carnegie Mellon, so I was in Pittsburgh. But before I had gone there, I lived in the Bay Area. And so when I, got connected with Intel, I was like, well, do I want to go back to the Bay Area, yes or no? And then I went to interview with Intel, and it was like so perfect. The company was pretty small at the time. It was 92, so I think we would have been, Intel was maybe about 20,000 people. It was maybe about $8 billion in revenue. And it was, Andy Grove was the CEO. So it was like a company that people were just starting to understand what it was and what's a computer chip and, what does that mean to my life? And so I came out for the interview, and honestly, I was skeptical that I would be interested in this. And by the end of the interview, I was like, okay, I'm ready to sign up. I'm ready to be a part of this company, because there was just so much innovation going on and so many unknowns. And it just was really exciting to me. And that's kind of how Intel was my whole career. Each time I felt like, oh, well, there's something better outside. Then I rotated to a new area of the company, and I got challenged in a new way. I had to learn new skills. I had to, be able to have impact in a different situation. And so just constant innovation. And I loved the culture there that Andy Grove had created. It was only that he had written a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And the idea that essentially you have to disrupt yourself, because if you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else is, looking to take your customers, looking to take your business. And so that constant sort of challenge environment was I think, spectacular. And so I couldn't ever run out of things to do or run out of things to learn. So it took me 29 years to actually find the next thing that I wanted to go towards.
A cup of coffee. You mentioned Andy, and, when I think of the iconic CEOs in American history, I mean, the oldest one I can think of is Henry Ford, but then there's, Jack Welch, and certainly got to throw Steve Jobs and Bill Gates in there. But I put Andy right in that category. I mean, he is legendary, it's fair to say. I'm assuming you probably knew him a little bit.
Yeah. When I was in the corporate planning role, that was, kind of the corporate finance role, I got to, present to him and to Gordon Moore, who obviously was the author of Moore's Law, which really is the drumbeat of the entire semiconductor industry. And so I remember I worked for the gentleman that was the CFO at the time. His name was Andy Bryant. And I was getting ready to present. I was practicing presenting to these industry luminaries. And I was so nervous to present to them. Andy Grove had been Time Magazine Person of the Year. Obviously he's a tremendous person. And so this Andy, the CFO, says to me, well, they're just people. And I'm like, well, that isn't even slightly true. I mean, they're people that invented an industry. They're not just people. They're these luminaries. But he really taught me the idea that I had to think about what was important to them and how do I make sure that when I'm presenting, I'm actually presenting in a way that's going to make sense to them. And that is something I think about all the time. We used to have these conversations about how do you get an A in this presentation, which really, sometimes you might define it as, well, this is what I want to tell people. But that's very different from, is that the right way to frame it for that individual? The way that that individual parses information, is it really geared towards some way that they think about it, or is it just the way that you want to do it? So anyway, that was really important learning, because obviously both of them, incredible technologists, incredible leaders, and the way they were thinking about things was at a much higher level than sometimes I was. So I had to really focus on putting myself at the right altitude to engage with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would be. But yeah, everyone's only people, but it doesn't mean you're not going to be a reasonable person, won't be intimidated by them. So.
Exactly. Well, I got into one where we were presenting, and then the two of them were debating, did they fundamentally believe in the physics of matter and how matter conducted itself? And I thought to myself, wow, just to be in a fly on the wall with these two people talking about that was pretty tremendous.
Oh, yeah, absolutely makes sense. And then you went a slightly different sized company, but still a great company. You went to Zendesk?
Yeah.
After Intel. And did you know Elena Gomez?
Yes, absolutely. I know Elena. She's tremendous.
Yeah.
And I really went to, it's funny because I was ready to be a CFO. And, sometimes that position's not available at the place that you're at. So you have to, go on your journey. And at that point, so much of the value was coming from software. And so much of, the way that software was getting written was so different and modern on the cloud, the SaaS model. And at Intel, most of the value is coming, it has a lot of software, but the value comes from hardware. So really understanding that part of the business and that part of the value chain was important. And Elena was a great supporter, helping me ramp. And then we still are, in connection to this day. She's a tremendous leader.
Yeah, she actually keynoted our conference last year, and I got to know her a little bit through that. And as you might guess, she was a huge hit with the audience, and
Absolutely.
yeah, she was just great to work with too. And it's been quite a success story. She's gone on to do some great things with one of the iconic local companies too. But I kind of glossed over a little bit with Intel, not glossed over it, but other than obviously being the dominant chip maker, they're known for sort of their culture, and it's a continuous learning type of environment. So I'm curious, who might have been some key mentors that you met along the way during your journey at Intel and Zendesk too, if you'd like?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my key mentors was the gentleman who was the CFO and then became the Chief Administrative Officer, Andy Bryant. And the culture, as you said, was Andy Grove built a culture with the Paranoid Survive, this idea of constructive confrontation, where you're confronting the problem, not the person, but whatever's the issue, what isn't working, and how do we get that on the table so we can dissect it, so we can solve it without assigning blame to people, because sometimes people get defensive, but like we really get the problem on the table and take the problem down. And one of the things that was, really always so important to me is working for Andy Bryant, who was the CFO and then became the Chief Administrative Officer. He used to always ask this question of me, well, what would you do if you were king? It moves you sort of from a spectator into you have responsibility. And that was one of the cultural aspects of Intel, assumed responsibility. When you had a problem, it's your problem. So no matter what the problem is, you've found the problem, you own it. You might not be the right person to solve the problem. Maybe somebody else should solve the problem, but it's up to you to get that problem handed off to the right person, or it's up to you to get the people together. And so that was sort of his, what would you do if you were king? Move you out of that sort of, armchair critic or, commentator into, no, you have an active role. And if you aren't doing something about it, then that is the same as creating the problem. Which is like, whoa, I thought, complaining was going to be helpful here. It actually turns out complaining solves zero problems. This is, I think it's, scientifically proven. And so really moves you into what I always think like an owner, think and act like an owner. How do you make sure that you remove barriers or solve problems? And so Andy was a great mentor for me. And then throughout my years, I always had people that I really admired. Sometimes they had very different opinions from me, but I would seek them out because the way that they thought about things was so different from me that I wanted to understand their perspectives. And so I had mentors both in the finance organization and in the operations organization that I would constantly touch base with and just get their perspective on how they were thinking about things. And then obviously, as I went on to Zendesk, I had great mentors who were on the board at Zendesk, who I use quite a bit. And then as I've come to Synopsys, great mentors beyond even Synopsys, beyond even this technology world, other peers of mine in the CFO arena. And what I've always kind of think about is, your team is as big as you want it to be. So draw your circle as big as you want it to be. So sometimes the people that you look to advice from are from a very different part of the industry. And maybe they're not even a part of your particular domain, but they're going to give you a perspective that's going to force you to look at a problem in a different way.
That makes sense. And I love the fact that some of your key mentors are your fellow CFOs. And, look what I do for a living, right? I suppose it might be self-serving, but, that is one thing I've learned, that executives, they learn from their peers more than, almost any other resource that they can. So it's great that you've done that. But so I do want to talk a little about Synopsys, and I'm curious, you had a couple of great gigs, well-branded, well-respected companies. So what drew you to the role at Synopsys?
Well, it's funny because when I was at Intel, I knew Synopsys because, Intel obviously makes advanced computing chips and, Synopsys is the leader in the software to make advanced computing chips. And so I knew Synopsys for that. And, as I said, I went to Zendesk to learn software. And then when the Synopsys opportunity came through, it was like the integrated perfection of all that because Synopsys makes software similar to Zendesk. But it's for the engineers, and it is software that helps make semiconductor chips. So obviously, I spent 29 years making semiconductor chips. So it was like the integration of those two things. And so to me, it was the perfect mix. And I got to meet the founder of Synopsys, who is still the chair of the board today. And then our incoming at the time, the gentleman who is the president, who's now the CEO. And I just fell in love with the company, just understanding the innovation that we drive is so cutting edge because we have to build the software before the cutting edge chips get built. So if you think about it, we have to be ahead of the future so that people can build the future on top of it. I mean, it's so fascinating. And really the capabilities that we, serve up to our customers are absolutely mission critical for them to be able to, design chips. And, one thing that the customer has is an unbelievable amount of complexity. So they're getting asked to deliver more and more performance in computing with less and less power. Okay, those two things run polar opposite. So how do we give tools that customers tame that enormously complex opportunity? And so the minute I came here, I think I came over like a holiday to come here to meet with the founder and then the then president. And just the minute I came here, I was like, oh, I want to be a part of this company. This is so important. What we're doing for our customers is so important. And I just felt like I want to be part of the mission.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It sounds like almost everything came out like I don't believe in fate or anything like that, but it does seem like the universe was asking for you to take this particular position
I think so.
at that moment in your life. So, but you referenced the CEO, Saseen Ghazi, and I'm curious, is he? Did you say you started around the same time as him, or
No, he had been at the company about 25 years. He actually started at Intel as a design engineer. So he did what our customers do. And then he grew throughout his career at the company. He's basically done every single role of the company. And then it was a very thoughtful transition between our founder and Saseen to get him, larger and larger remit and to prepare him for the CEO role. And so his transition to CEO happened about a year after I joined the company.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm always curious because, like, for years, CFOs have said their most important partnership is with the CEO. But since COVID, it's being reciprocated. A lot of CEOs are now saying that their most important partnership is with the CFO. And while it happened a little bit before, it's happening in larger and larger numbers these days. But how do you build a relationship with your CEO, based upon trust and respect? And, sometimes you're the only person who's going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to the CEO.
Yeah, I think about it as, a key business partnership, and I'm a key lieutenant for the CEO. And for me, one of the things that's always really important is, like you said, mutual trust, mutual respect, and full transparency. Absolutely full transparency. And the way I think about my role to the CEO as CFO is a combination of challenge and support. And so in the end, as we move forward on something, we're going to be fully aligned. That doesn't mean that we might not come with different opinions, that we're going to, different points of view or different opinions that we're going to have a deep discussion about. But once we align on something, we're going to be fully aligned. But yeah, part of my role is to basically give the comprehensive picture. What is the full picture? What is the, opportunity? What's the investment required? What's the time frame? What's the return? Where are the risks in that? So we have what I would call a full 360 of what the opportunity is, and it's no sugarcoating. So I'm not here to gloss over if something's a big risk or something we have to go off and mitigate, and really be in a situation where we can have those very trusted and honest dialogues. And so I very much think that is the most important relationship. And it's most important because really, if you think about how does the company become successful, it becomes successful because we're able to have hard conversations. And we're we're testing ourselves and checking ourselves on, is that actually really the right set of decisions to make? And so having the ability to have hard conversations is really important to be able to build that relationship. Because without a strong relationship, to your point, how do you have those, more tough, more challenging conversations? And so I view that as one of the most important relationships and one of my most important roles.
That makes sense. And I forget who said it, but someone said if two people always agree, one of them is not really needed. So, if you're just usually very successful CEOs are not looking for yes men or yes women. They're looking to be appropriately challenged in the role. It sounds like you've been able to do that, grow a great company and do it in a respectful and productive way, which is the name of the game, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes, first of all, it's very hard to be a CEO. What a hard job, because the, demands on you, the demands on your time, first of all, are, often beyond 24 hours. And then depending on sort of the lens maybe that somebody's presenting something to you, it might not be the full lens. It might just be a point of view. And my role is to have that whole 360 view and be able to save time for the CEO and be able to have him be able to do, the high impact work that he can do both inside the company and in the industry.
Strategic leadership isn't just nice to have for today's CFOs. It's a necessity. As the demands of your role evolve, staying ahead means learning from those at the top of their game. Join us at the Spring 2025 CFO Leadership Conference, where finance leaders come together to tackle today's most pressing challenges. Over 3 dynamic days, you'll experience interactive workshops, inspiring panel discussions, and unparalleled network opportunities with peers who understand your world. Hear from top-tier speakers, including CFOs from industry giants like Philo, Conagra Brands, NerdWallet, and OpenText, plus other thought leaders who are shaping the future of finance. And don't miss the Indiana Jones of the FBI as he shares unforgettable leadership lessons from his extraordinary career. Gain actionable strategies, real-world insights, and the tools to elevate your leadership and drive your organization's success. Register now at cfolc.com to take advantage of early bird pricing. And don't forget to use the code ROCKSTAR100 for even more savings. Let's grow, lead, and solve challenges together.
That's great. So I want to change a little bit, although, still on the company, but the rise of artificial intelligence. And, I always joke with Jessica that I'm legally obligated to ask at least one question about AI during every episode. But how is the rise of AI shaping your overall corporate strategy and your financial strategy as well?
It's probably one of the most profound changes that I can think of in my career, just the speed at which it's getting adopted into so many things. So I'll start sort of with a company and then move into how then internally we're doing it too. So we're in the business of, enabling advanced compute chips. The most advanced compute chips that are being built right now are AI chips. So as we're serving our customers are using our software to build AI chips and AI solutions. And as that's happening, how people want to build compute is changing because the cycles are shrinking. The requirements and the performance requirements are so intense for these workloads. So people aren't willing to do things the way they've always done things. They need to start designing chips in new and different ways. So we've infused AI into all of our tools. So all of our workflows that we offer to our customers actually includes AI in the workflow. And we're working on eventually at some point, how do we even have the idea of agentic capabilities? So if you will, an agent that can help you build your advanced compute AI chip. So it's, the kind of people we support don't have enough people to do the job. There's not enough advanced semiconductor design engineers. And it's getting so complex that people need tools to develop those chips. So if you think us as a strategy, our strategy is how do we enable our customers to be able to build these ever more advanced chips and at the same time modernize the environment, infusing AI in it so that they can build these chips. So it's sort of the, kind of that big virtuous circle. And then if you think about our company, we have a lot of software engineers. That's, the most important part of our company. We're a company of a little bit north of 20,000 people. The majority of people in the company are software engineers. So how do we also use AI to modernize the environment that they're in? So when they're building these capabilities for our customers, how are we, as our founder would say, eat at our own restaurant? How are we infusing AI so we can free our people up so our people can even innovate more to be able to offer more to our customers? So that's, one of the things that we're working on, how we infuse that in sort of every part of our business. And then we're looking at how we infuse that even into what you might call sort of the core engine of the company. If you think about how we do go to market, how we do finances, how we do marketing, how do we use some of these AI tools and capabilities to free those teams up? So we're essentially creating capacity for more innovation and more capability in those teams. So we very much see it as, shaping the industry in a very profound way. And we have an important role to play for our customers so that they can actually build these advanced chips and then use them to modernize the work environment. So it's a pretty exciting place to be. And honestly, I just, almost every day you're reading something new about, a new large language model or a new capability that people have. And it's just, to me, I don't think we've really fully appreciated what this can actually do for almost every aspect of every business.
Yeah. And, when the internet kind of became a thing, that happened within the course of my career. And I just kind of assumed, I was maybe 30 or so, and late 20s. And I just kind of assumed this is the biggest innovation that I will ever experience in my professional life. And until now, that has actually probably proven to be true. But this has all the feel of being something quite a bit bigger than that. So, but
Yeah, I agree with you. And the pace is what's so amazing to me. The pace of change is so amazing because this is such a rapid learning rate. And each time something new gets learned, when we ingest it, then we find something new that we can do. It's so great. And yeah, do you remember when it was like we first got our first browser and we were like, well, what in the heck do we do with this? And now what would we do without it, right?
yeah, that's the sign of the technology. Because you talk to young people and they're like, it would have been like my parents talking about the advent of television or something, I suppose. But they're like, what do you mean it was invented? It just, that it wasn't always here. And it's just such an accepted part of their life, right? That, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. And someday AI probably will have that type of feeling too. But I came across a great quote of yours. And I want to just read it and make sure I get it right. So and you said, finance is the scorecard of the strategy. And I was wondering if you could say it a little bit more about that and what that means to you. And people listening at home, hit pause, pick up a pencil and paper and write this down. So.
Yeah, so I think, one of the most important things that we do at the company is we set our strategic direction. And then we, together with the operations, work on operationalizing that strategy. So we know what we want to do. Now, how do we do it? How do we make sure we've got the investment in the right place? How do we make sure that we've got the right amount of people, that we've got the right capabilities? And then ultimately, we build the financial plan that links all those together, and that's the scorecard. And I can't think of a great strategy with terrible financials. Something's wrong with the strategy or something's wrong with the operationalization. And I always say, if it doesn't show up in the financials, did it ever really happen at all? Because you can't have some, great product that, is the best thing that anybody's ever seen before. Well, where the heck's the revenue for that product? Where the heck's the margin for that product? So to me, that's what I think is so great about finance. We can really connect all the dots together. And ultimately, the scorecard that we have is the financial plan that we put together that we commit all of us to. One of the things that I think is always so interesting is a lot of people are like, oh, you're in finance, so, you're there with the financial plan. And I'm like, actually, we're here with the financial plan because you really need everybody in the company rowing together to be able to make that strategy to operationalize to scorecard actually happen. So everybody needs to understand because every single day, every person in the company is making a decision whether we end up hitting that scorecard or we end up missing that scorecard. And they make decisions by which projects they work on. Which projects do they prioritize? Which project do they talk to about with the customer about? Every one of those micro decisions ends up landing in the financial plan somewhere, someplace, or it doesn't land in the financial plan someplace because somebody didn't have that conversation or somebody didn't dedicate their team to build that product. So to me, that's the scorecard. And the great thing about a public company, I get to get a grade every 90 days. We set out what we're going to do, and then we build what I call commit and deliver. Commit and deliver, because in the end, our ability to execute to what we said we were going to do, despite there's, lots of known unknowns that are going to happen, commit and deliver is what gives us the permission to do the next big thing at the company.
That's I never thought of it that you get a report cut every 90 days, right? But yeah, because in my days as a CFO, I was with venture-backed startups, so I never had the stress of being a public company CFO, but plenty of friends who did. So I have a good sense that it ain't for the faint of heart, as somebody says. But I want to chat a little about Synopsys. And in particular, you've got this tiny little acquisition coming up, a company called Ansys. And I'm curious about the genesis of that. Why, and it was, for those who don't pick up on it, it's not a tiny acquisition. It's $35 billion, if I have my facts straight. So, what was the genesis of that? Why this acquisition at this moment in time? And, anything you can share on it.
Sure, absolutely. So if Ansys, which we may not be a household name, Ansys is probably not a household name. So we build software for digital chip design. So that's kind of our expertise. And what Ansys builds is computational multi-physics software, which again might not be a household name, but you could think of that as being doing crash testing and things like that. So more mathematical formulas that you can model to give you the sense of what's going to happen in a crash. Like, say, a car, when you build the chassis for the car, what's going to happen? How will the airbags deploy? What will happen to the passengers? So that actually can all be modeled in physics. So you don't actually have to crash the car. You run millions and millions of tests in a physics model. And really what's happening now, and it goes back to our AI conversation, Jack, what's happening now, like a car's turning into a computer on wheels. So if we move from combustion engines to EV, it used to be that chips in a car, maybe they controlled the infotainment. So, whether the sound or something like that. But now the chip is controlling the whole car, and it's controlling the safety in the car. And so when you go to design something like a car, you want to be able to design in the same design environment. What does that physical manifestation look like? And then what is going to happen with all those chips inside the car? And how, when something happens, are you going to get the right outcome? And you want to have like a single design environment for the engineers to be able to design both the mechanical and the digital. And so that becomes a math model that they work in, if you will, sort of the cockpit that they work in. And if they find, like in a car, for example, if the chip's taking too much of the power, that's why you don't have a very big range in the car. So you need the chip to actually be power managed. Or how do you, download software into the chip when the car's on the road? Because cars obviously go lots of different places. Well, that's something that you can figure out in the early stages of the chip design. But right now, those are two different design environments. So an engineer only has the specifications of the chip, but ultimately what they want to do is be able to design those two things simultaneously. Because if you find a problem here, it's much better if you solve it all the way in the beginning of the digital design. So you solve the power performance optimization, you have a much better chance of getting a better outcome if you do it all the way in the beginning. But again, right now, those are two different design environments. And you can think of right now problems that hyperscalers have. When you put a lot of chips together, it takes up too much power. And so, you only have so much power in a data center. But if you could design that in a single design environment, you could see how you could optimize the chips for the power performance so that when you got to the data center, it was optimized. So it's really think about modernizing R&D. There's about $1 trillion of R&D. So how do we create tools and capabilities so people can actually make products and solutions in a much more modern way than they do. So it's bringing together this multi-physics world, this digital design world into sort of a single cockpit for our customers. And so really, we call it silicon to systems, because most things are getting designed workload down. And so once you know what the workload is, you actually want everything in that whole build optimized for that workload. And if you don't, you end up with the wrong power, the wrong performance, the wrong outcome. And so that's what we're in service of. So this has always been a company that we've had a relationship with. So for multiple years, we've been in partnership with them. Since 2017, our CEO formed a deep partnership with them. And so we've got a go-to-market partnership where we co-sell, and we've got, some, engagement on the R&D side. But there's still two different environments. What our customers want is a singular environment. And to be able to do that, you need to bring the two companies together so you could kind of create the tools and capabilities end to end for our customers. And so that's really the genesis of it. We're super excited about it. And our customers even more are excited about it because the problems they're having today, and semiconductor customers right now are doing something called multi-design. They're moving sort of from building a ranch house, which is like everything on a single chip, to building a high-rise condo. And so when you build a high-rise condo and you put hot chips on top of hot chips, a lot of things can go wrong, and they're multi-physics problems. So how do we help customers like, an NVIDIA or a hyperscaler design in that virtual world so they can spot the issues and so they can create a much better product? So it's super exciting. It's, I think, going to be able to create a design environment for our customers. And again, our customer is a design engineer, that person inside the company that was responsible for products and solutions, to help make their job much easier and allow them to be able to, continue to innovate in a much more modern way.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Just another one, I said earlier, the fates were lining up, but this seems, to an outsider, this seems like an almost perfect type of acquisition for you to be involved in. So I want to change the gears. I'm always interested in this, particularly from CFOs who didn't grow up from the public accounting route, because, your perspective is a little different than pure GAAP. But what are some of the most powerful KPIs that you use within your company to measure business success?
So we have the KPIs that you would be thinking of, so what's happening with backlog, what's happening with revenue, what's happening in terms of our customer design, in terms of their R&D. So where are they in the R&D? How many chips are they building? And then the other thing that I really look at is what's happening with our talent. How are we doing on hiring? How are we doing on growing and progressing our talent? Because to me, that's an early indicator of whether we're going to get to revenue numbers, of whether we're going to get to bookings. Are we able to get the talent that we want? Are we struggling to get the talent we want? Are we able to develop that talent? Because so goes our future revenue and our future opportunity.
That's fantastic. I just think it's such an exciting thing. But I want to shift gears a little bit now, because you're actually on the board of another public company, PubMatic. And I'm curious a little about, how that works out with you. What's your role there? I suspect you're probably on the audit committee, but what are some of the things you're doing at PubMatic?
Yeah, it's great. I'm the audit chair, so it's really helpful because, of course, I have an audit committee in Synopsys, so I think it helps me have the outside-in perspective. And what's really helpful, it's in a very different area. It's digital advertising, which is not a field that I knew that much about, which, so that expands my knowledge, learning about that whole part of the industry, which is super fascinating and going through a lot of transformation. But being the audit chair, how do I make sure, first of all, I have an open dialogue with both the CFO and the CEO? And how do I be of service to them? Because I'm not an operator there. I'm there to help be, voice of the shareholder, but also support for the CEO, the leadership team, and most specifically the CFO. So I really enjoy it because it gives me that outside-in lens, which sometimes when I'm thinking of developing things for my audit committee, I'm probably going in too much detail. How do I help summarize things so I get that at the right altitude for them to be able to weigh in and give advice on? And so kind of having both those lenses helps me check myself. And then also what's really great about it is being a part of developing another finance team. And that's, something, so I meet with a CFO and I meet with a chief accounting officer. That's one of the things that I feel like as, I've come through my career, there were always people helping me develop. That's something that I feel like I have to be a net creator of talent for the industry. And it could be, in finance, it can be in other different areas, but that's certainly something that I really enjoy, being able to be a resource and being able to be of assistance as they're building their team and creating their capability to be able to optimize and maximize the company.
It's interesting. So do you think your role on a board and an audit committee changes how you approach your day-to-day job as a CFO or maybe makes you even a more effective CFO?
Yeah, I think it helps broaden my perspective. And, one of the things that I always think about is, you look out one particular window, which just always informs how you think about things, but it's just one particular window. So getting other people's views and realizing sort of some of the other challenges that are happening makes me step back when I'm thinking about something and wait a minute, have I thought about this thoroughly enough? Have I actually really thought broadly enough about what the possible solutions are? So to me, that helps me be better in my CFO role. It helps me be better with my board. And it just really pushes me sort of out of getting into a routine view of things and challenges me, which I love to be challenged.
No, that's fantastic. And you have I always have great admiration for people who have a lot going on and lead a healthy life because you're with a CFO of a very visible public company and you're also on the audit committee board with a public company and, it just never ends. So do you have any tips for achieving work-life balance to the extent that that's even possible for someone in your role?
Yeah, I guess part of it is don't fall for this idea that there's a perfection because I think that work-life balance implies that somebody else is doing it and you're not. So first of all, take that panic out. No one is perfect at any of this, having the perfect amount of time. One of the things I think about is like, what's my number one today? And make sure that you're checking yourselves. I mean, maybe your number one, maybe there's somebody in your family that's at the hospital. Guess what? That's probably your number one. So making sure that you sort of check in with yourself about what your priority is, and then sort of ruthless ZBB is the way I think about it. And it could be ruthless ZBB on the home front. It could be ruthless ZBB at work. So making sure that you're not falling into the trap of doing something like, you know what, the dishes in your sink, they'll probably be there later. It's okay. You can go read a story with your kid or go to your child's event. It's okay. So this idea that everybody has something perfectly balanced, I realized I've got 3 daughters. And I realized when I had my my third daughter that I, was under the impression that somehow everybody else knew exactly the right proportion to do everything in. But once I had 3, I realized nobody really knows. But again, each day, if I can pick, okay, this is my most important thing, I have to make sure that this thing happens, that really helps. And then also the other thing I would say is making sure that you give yourself a break. So, go out for a walk or do some physical activity every single day. It could be the smallest thing in the world. It doesn't have to be something big and elaborate, but make sure you get out in nature or you get out of sort of your grind is important. And that's both on the home front and at work. But this idea that somebody else has it all figured out, nobody has it all figured out.
Well,
And so just being really clear on your number one, and it can change every day. It can be changed. It could be a different number one every day. That's okay.
that's a great attitude. Although, as I think I'm in Boston and it's 16 degrees here. So getting out every day isn't always that pleasant around here. But
Well, it sure wakes you up when you go out in 16 degrees.
yeah, if nothing else. So it does have that effect on you. So no, that's great. And the tagline, or one of the things for this podcast, we say that CFOs no longer report history; they make history. And I think that's fair. That the role has changed considerably since I was a CFO. But I'm curious if you could take out your crystal ball a little bit, and what do you see the nature of financial leadership changing in the years ahead?
Yeah, I certainly think that it is about helping make the business happen, helping setting the strategy, helping unlock the strategy, and then helping bring sort of the various parts of the company together to be able to maximize the full potential of the company. That's what I think of the role. And I think that definition of the role means that, the CFO has to be in front of learning new technologies and understanding how those technologies both could be used in sort of the product area and can be used in how you run the company. So I very much see the CFO role continuing to evolve into strategy operations and really helping accelerate the pace of the company. So to that extent, I would say I really think the idea of challenging yourself in a lot of different roles and playing a lot of different roles as you come through your career is super important, because it's one thing to, have a view of, academically what that role's like. It's another view to actually really live that role.
That makes sense. And it sort of is a good segue, although you kind of gave a bunch of the answers. But I always like to ask from our guests, what's some advice that you have for the next generation of CFOs? Maybe people who are going to get their first CFO role in the next, 18 months or so or whatever, or even like a rookie CFO doing it for the first time.
Yeah, so I think part of it starts with making sure that you really deeply understand your business. So making sure you are making connections with the business leaders and you're making sure you're understanding from the customers, their perspective. So deeply understand it and then build your team. And by build your team, the team isn't just your finance team. The team is actually who is going to be helpful and helping the company accelerate, and how do you build your connection? Could be salespeople, could be product people. Make sure that you're really investing in those people and you're investing in how you can remove barriers for challenges that those people face.
I think that's fantastic advice. Sheila, I know you have a lot going on these days and probably just in general, so I do want to thank you for being a guest on the podcast. And I enjoyed the conversation. I know that my listeners will as well. And I'd just like to give you the final word.
Yeah, I guess my final word would be push yourself out of your comfort zone. If I think about how did I get to this chair, I wasn't a baby and then became a CFO. None of that happened. And I know sometimes that can be the story. Really trying a lot of different things and then learning from things that didn't go well is what made me be able to be in a role like this, because there's a lot of times where your role is helping course correct things. And so I would just say, get out of your comfort zone, challenge yourself, and really focus on constantly learning. And I think that's really how you get to be in a chair like this.
That wraps up this episode of The Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. A huge thank you to our sponsors, Plantful and the CFO Leadership Council, for their amazing support. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and visit us at rockstarcfos.com. Until next time, rock on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.